Hi there. Let us talk about ecology. Now, as I normally do, I'm going to take it from the scratch, okay, in order for you to understand it. But one thing you must keep in mind is that you have to understand the levels of organization of life in order to understand ecology fully. But so that you can understand the context from which I'm speaking, I'm going to start from what ecology is and build it up from the scratch, okay? So now, the term ecology actually was first proposed in 1869 by a certain scientist known as Haeckel, okay? But it wasn't until like the 19th century before another a Danish botanist named Eugenius Warming. So he was the one that now expounded on the term ecology that made us understand what the term really means. Okay, so now the term ecology is actually gotten from two Greek words, which are oikos and logos. Oikos means a dwelling place, a dwelling or a habitat or a home. A dwelling place, a habitat, or a home. While logos means study, just like you know in biology and every other words that end with logy. Any word that ends with logy, that logy is from logos. It means study of something. Okay, so we have oikos, which means dwelling place or habitat, while logos means study. Accordingly, we can therefore define ecology as the study of the dwelling place of an organism. Is that okay? But that's not the way we actually give it. But that's what the root word actually gives us. That is the study of the dwelling place of an organism. Yeah. But actually, scientifically, it is defined as the study of man in relation to his environment. So what that means is that ecology studies the way man interacts with his environment and the way his environment interacts back with him. Yes, and then you might begin to think that, does the environment interact with us? Yes, you are going to know in just a moment. All right. So, the environment of man is comprised of both the living and non-living environment. So basically, we are talking about the study of the way man interacts with both his living and non-living environment and vice versa. All right. So that's what ecology is. Now, in the non-living environment, we have light, we have sound, we have wind, we have water, we have land, and all of those things. They are the non-living, they constitute the non-living environment. Atmosphere, chemicals around in the air, all right? Those are non-living environments. Then the living environment and the living part of the environment, which you also know is called the biotic component, includes the plants and animals and basically microorganisms. Okay, now in about 1935, another scientist coined the term ecosystem. Okay, so the name of scientists that coined ecosystem, I'm forgetting right now, but he coined ecosystem and described ecosystem as a unit in an environment, okay, that consists of both the living and non-living components. Okay, so the ecosystem is the basic unit of ecology. The ecosystem is the basic functional unit of ecology. Now, what does this mean? It means that, we said that in ecology, we are studying the interaction between man and his living and non-living environment. But ecology, ecosystem is basically the smallest, a small portion in a local in the in an environment where we have both living, non-living, living and non-living components. So where the organism interacts with both the living and the non-living components in its surrounding. Is that okay? Now, in order to understand ecosystem, I said you must understand the levels of organization of life. So we have it that an atom, life, or think of it as the smallest particle of life form, whether non-living or living, is going to be the atom, isn't it? In chemistry, we know that. So that is atom. So atom is basically what matter is made up of, right? Okay. Now, when atoms now come together, they form molecules. Molecules. Now, when molecules come together, molecules and compounds, okay? Now, when molecules now aggregate themselves together in large quantity, they form macromolecules. Macromolecules. Then macromolecules are the ones that now come up, different macromolecules will now come together to perform the same, to form a particular entity called an organelle. An organelle in the cell of a living thing. Okay, so macromolecules make up the organelles. I mean, macromolecules are the building blocks of the molecules are basically the building blocks. Okay, but macromolecules is what we have together that forms the organelle in a cell. All right. Now it means that it is when organelles now function together to perform a specific function that will form a cell. Okay, which is the basic functional unit of life, basic functional and structural unit of life. Then the cells function together to form the tissues. All right. Then the tissue function together. Different tissues come together to perform the same function, and they form the organ. An organ, okay? So when different organs of the body now function together, different organs come together, they form a system, a coordinated system of organs that we call system or organ system. Is that okay? Organ system. Okay? So now when this coordinated system of organs now function together to perform a particular function, they form what is called the organism. They form the organism itself because they are solving the entire about eight systems that we have as living things. Those systems function together to perform the function of keeping us alive and for posterity, for us to our offspring to be available for continuity of life. That's what I was looking for continuity of life. So that is what these all things are functioning for at the end of the day. Is that okay? So now when organisms now come together, when organisms now unite together, we form, if they are of the same species, so organisms of the same species coming together form a population. Now we are getting somewhere now, so stick with me. So now when a population of different organisms, when population of different organisms now come together, that is, we have a population of mosquitoes, a population of cockroach, a population of humans, a population of rats, as you have them in your house. So that forms a community. It forms a community. So a community is a group of population together in a particular environment. That are so different populations that are bounded by the same environment, within the same environment forms a community. Now, when we now have different communities functioning together, then we now have, so in this case, we now have different communities, that is, including both living and non-living community. Then we form the ecosystem. So you can see where an ecosystem comes from now. An interacting species of non-living, an interacting unit rather. An ecosystem will be an interacting unit. Interacting unit of living and non-living entities, non-living components. Okay, so you see that so far I've been stressing the fact that ecosystem consists of both living and non-living components. Now, what if ecosystem, we now have different ecosystems? It's different ecosystems that come together that forms what we call the biosphere. Okay, when we have multiple ecosystems. So ecosystem can be studied in two scales. We have the small scale and the large scale. Okay, so for example, an ecosystem could be a pond, a small pond, a lake, okay, a field, a desert, okay, a forest, okay. In fact, something as small as an environment, for example, in your maybe just behind in your bathroom or in the toilet somewhere, as far as there are different species of organisms there and there are non-living components, of course, which must exist there, then we have an ecosystem. So an ecosystem can be in the micro scale as well. That's what I'm trying to stress. It can be in the micro scale, while and it can also be in the large scale, as much as even the ocean, or as large as ocean, land, and all of that, which forms the biosphere, or this space that is occupied by us. Okay? Now, so since now you understand that the ecosystem is made up of both living and non-living components, then we should talk about both components. The living component of the ecosystem is called the biotic component, and the non-living component is called the abiotic component. Now, in biology, whenever you have the word A starts a word that can stand on its own, it means that A there is standing as not. For example, we have sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, that is not sexual reproduction. We have, for example, even the word atom means, tom in Greek means to cut, then a means not, that is that which cannot be cut. Do you understand? So in this case, we have the biotic, bios there. The biotic is coming from the word bios, which means life. Okay? So abiotic means non-living components. Now, what are the biotic components in an ecosystem? The biotic components in an ecosystem include the producers. Let me use simplistic terms first. We have plants, animals, and microorganisms. All right, these are the biotic components. These three are the biotic components of our ecosystem. How about the abiotic component? There are many abiotic components, including weather, water, air, atmosphere, light, every other thing that is non-living, okay, in your environment, chemical. So the biotic component could be, the abiotic component rather, could be physical abiotic component and chemical abiotic component. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the differences later. All right, let's talk about the plants. These biotic components are in full. Let's discuss them. All right. Now, we have plants which are called the producers in an ecosystem. The plants, the producers, are one of the most important aspects of the most important component of the ecosystem. Now, what are the producers therefore? Just like the name implies, it tells you they are the ones that are making energy, that are bringing energy into the form that can be used by the ecosystem. Is that clear? They are transforming energy into useful form in the ecosystem. They are the first stage of transformation of energy. Okay, so what is the chief energy source of the earth? It is the sun. Sunlight is the chief source. All right. So through a process known as photosynthesis, these guys, producers, are able to convert light energy. So these guys convert light energy into chemical energy, in form of food, usually carbohydrates. And they store it in them as starch. Okay, so they store this carbohydrates in them as starch. So it is this starch that the next level, which are the animals, will now take from them. How? Through feeding relationships, and that is food web, food chain, food web, and pyramid of numbers, and trophic levels. But I won't be doing that in this video. I'll do it in the next video. So we now have the animals. But before we talk about the animals in full, I just want you to know that these guys feed on these guys in order to be able to access this chemical energy locked up as food, locked up in form of starch in them. So it is when these animals now feed on them that they are able to do what? Access those things. Now, you see, these three groups, these ones are called the autotrophs, based on the fact that they are able to produce their own food. So we call them autotrophs. The plants are called autotrophs. The word trophos there means food, feeding, okay? While auto means self, that is feeding by themselves. While these two here, they are called heterotrophs. Heterotrophs mean they feed on other organisms, on different sources. That's the meaning of hetero there. Hetero means on a variety of other sources. So meaning that they don't manufacture their own food, they depend on other organisms for their own food. All right, now, since we now know that plants are called autotrophs, now there are two types of autotrophs. We have the photoautotrophs and the chemoautotrophs. Now watch. The photoautotrophs, just like the name implies here, you have photo meaning light, you have auto meaning self, you have trophos meaning feeding, okay? So it means they use light to perform self-feeding. Is that okay? And the process is known as photosynthesis. Now, if you want me to also make a full video on photosynthesis, I have taught it to some of these my students before, but if you want me to make another video on photosynthesis, I am going to do that for you. So let me know in the comment section below. So photosynthesis is the process by which, you see, there are two words here. We have photo, light, synthesis. The word synthesia or synthesis actually means produce. So production through light, right? Using light to produce. But actually that name suggests that it is light that the process takes place throughout. The process takes place throughout. The entire process that takes place in the light is not always like that. There are two stages of this process which we know as the light and dark stage, but I will not be getting into the nitty-gritty of that. Just know that photosynthesis is the process by which these plants, and we mean green plants, okay, that because they possess chlorophyll, are able to manufacture their food. This is chlorophyll, double L, not 2, okay, now double L. So the process by which green plants, because of the presence of chlorophyll, at least chlorophyll A, So because of the presence of chlorophyll, are able to manufacture their food in the presence of sunlight. So they produce food in the presence of what? In the presence of light. Which light is this? Of sunlight. Of sunlight. Okay, now why did I mention chlorophyll here? Because there are different groups of organisms that are seen as photoautotrophs. Okay, I'll still talk about this chemoautotrophs later. Now we have algae. These are lower group of organisms. Algae, the algae that we see from prototists and even cyanobacteria. So the cheapest, almost the universal chlorophyll is known as chlorophyll A. We have the chlorophyll A, B, C, but the one that is universal to algae, cyanobacteria, higher plants, grasses and trees, the one that is universal to them, cyanobacteria. The one that is universal to them is the chlorophyll A. So every green plant have at least chlorophyll A and is able to use every green living organism has at least chlorophyll A, and that is, I'm talking about plants. I'm not talking about chameleon or animals that have green color. I'm saying like plants, things that grow from the ground, okay, and are also, that exhibit this green color because of, as a characteristic nature, they are able to photosynthesize because they have at least this chlorophyll A, which helps them to trap sunlight energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose. And this is the general form of the equation. In the video, if you request for a video of photosynthesis, I will break it down I'll break the process down on how this is being manufactured. So the general equation is that we have CO2 and H2 rather water. So they will use chlorophyll and sunlight to transform this into C6H12O6 plus O2. All right. So by the time you add 6 here, add 6 here, and add 6 here, it becomes balanced. So this is the general equation for photosynthesis. Is that clear? This comes together. You see that? So that's why you might have seen that in some textbooks they define it as the process by which inorganic substances come together to become organic, or organic food or organic material is synthesized by the through a process that organic food substances is synthesized using inorganic food substance, and that's what makes the process very unique and quite surprising, kind of. Okay, maybe not surprising, but like it makes it important. It's transforming inorganic material into organic material, glucose here, glucose. Okay, glucose, and this is the byproduct of photosynthesis. That is, it is this one that it releases out. Okay, now you must have heard some persons talk to you about the fact that plants breathe in oxygen. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. Why plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen? The context, that context actually scientifically is wrong. It is actually that what they are trying to say is that plants prefer to release their oxygen, okay, and leave their carbon dioxide. Actually, they also breathe in oxygen. They use oxygen for oxidative breakdown of glucose too, to release energy, but they pretty much don't need that amount of energy because they don't engage in any activity, any physical activity that really needs a lot of energy. So for that reason, they don't use their oxygen for breakdown so much. They rather store food. So the carbon dioxide that they produce during respiration is stored to be used for the manufacture of glucose, so that oxygen is released because of its accumulation. So it now seems as though they are breathing out oxygen, while in fact they are only conserving the carbon dioxide for food production. So that is photosynthesis. Green plants manufacture their food in the presence of sunlight using chlorophyll. Is that clear? All right. Now, so we now have the other type of autotrophic nutrition. This nutrition type, I'm going to talk about nutrition in my other video. So it's in that video on nutrition that I will talk about photosynthesis. So the next type of autotrophic nutrition is the chemosynthesis, or the next type of autotrophs is chemoautotrophs. Now, what are the chemoautotrophs? Now, first know that these photoautotrophs, through photosynthesis, manufacture or give about 98%, more than 98% of the energy that is available in the ecosystem. So that's why photosynthesis is the chief process that makes energy available in the ecosystem. These chemoautotrophs, they provide less than 1% of the energy in the ecosystem, because they have to do with organisms such as methane bacteria and other organisms that exist in maybe, for example, as we have in hydrothermal vents of the ocean. They use sulfur bacteria too. They use sulfur, they use methane to convert methane into organic food materials. So, but you know, that's the energy they release into the atmosphere or into their surrounding is very, very little. So because of that, we actually study them, but they are not as recognized as the photoautotrophs. The photoautotrophs are the chief player in energy circulation. Now, we have the animals now. Let's talk about the animals. Now, for the animals, we have them in groups too. We have them in groups. We have animals that are called the consumers. The animals are called the consumers, okay? We now have different levels of consumers. We have the primary consumers. We have the secondary consumers. We have the tertiary consumers. Now, who are the primary consumers? The primary consumers are the ones that feed directly on the photoautotrophs. That's why we call them primary. The primary consumers, they are the ones that go and get the energy first for us, okay, from the plants, okay? So we call them herbivores. They are chiefly herbivores. What does that mean? It means that they feed on herbs. Is that okay? They are herbivorous animals, meaning they feed on herbs. So the energy is already locked up as food in form of carbohydrates inside the plant. So herbivores eat the plant to make the energy available in them. Is that okay? But I'll talk about conversion percentages when we talk about nutrition. The efficiency of this process is just about 10% or 15%. 10 to 15% of the energy that is stored up in the herb is actually gotten by the animal, or from one level to the other of that transformation. I'm going to talk about that in the other video. Don't worry, it's very simple. Now, so there's the secondary consumers are the ones that will now feed on these guys. So we call them primary carnivores. Okay, primary carnivores. They are carnivores. Carnivorous animals are animals that eat flesh. So they are flesh eaters. Okay, but they are called primary flesh eaters. Why? Because they eat the primary consumers. They are the ones that eat the primary consumers. Example of the primary consumers first. Let's talk about them. We have goats. You know, on land we have grasshopper. We have lizard. We have etc. like that. Those are the we have snail. Those are the primary consumers. All right. Okay, now, you know that I mentioned lizard here. Now we have frog too. Okay. Now the thing is this, that we now have some. There is no distinct. There are some animals that are specifically primary carnivores, specifically tertiary carnivores. But usually in the real world, there are many other animals that appear in between, usually because they feed on more than one level. So for example, there are some animals that can feed on both plants and animals. We call them omnivores. Omnivores. Now, omnivores are animals that can feed on both plants and animals. Example is human. Human can feed on both plants and animals. Okay, so secondary consumers are the primary carnivores, and example of those ones include that same lizard, because it's an omnivore. Okay, we have even frog. You know, we have frog. We have rats. We have snake. These guys are primary carnivores. Small snakes though. Okay, we didn't talk about in the aquatic ecosystem. Now we will still talk about types of ecosystem. You understand what I mean by aquatic ecosystem? In the water, we have carps. We have carps. We have carps. We have tilapia. These are all herbivores. Okay, they feed on plants. Now these ones that now feed on them. So for example, in the water we have trouts. We have trouts. We have the bonito. What do you call the bonito fish again? I've forgotten the name. Salmons. You know, these ones now feed on these guys. Is that okay? Large salmons. Then we now have the tertiary consumers. The tertiary consumers are the top predators. We call them top predators. Okay? Or secondary carnivores. Secondary carnivores. Why? Because they are the ones that feed on the first level of flesh eaters. They feed on the first level of flesh eaters. Examples include the lion, the tiger. You're already expecting that here. Eagle. Because for example, here we have some birds. Some birds exist here. Some birds exist here. Okay? So we now have that eagle is going to be a top predator that feed on those other ones. Okay? They feed on the secondary consumers, which are the primary carnivores. Is that clear now? So this is the levels that we have for the consumers. Now let's talk about the so now we have omnivores which eat in between. Then we now have another group of organisms that feed on every one of them. We call them the detritivores. Detritivores rather. Detritivores feed on the word, it's gotten from the word detritus. Detritus means the wastes, dead, decaying organisms. Is that okay? So those are detrivores. So detritivores rather feed on those, they help us to, they feed on the dead remains of herbivores, feed on dead remains of both primary, secondary, and tertiary consumer, and even plants. Is that okay? So that's why we call the organisms that are around here, we call them decomposers. Decomposers. So that's the third one I was supposed to add. So we have the three levels of the organisms that exist in ecosystems. We have animals or producers. We have plants or producers, animals and microorganisms or consumers, and we have decomposers. So those are the three levels. The three levels we say what? Plants and producer, animals, consumers, and decomposers. It is the decomposers that recycle the nutrients, okay? So we call them recyclers of the ecosystem. The recyclers of the ecosystem are the decomposers. All right, now let's talk about the microorganisms. Now, what do? Basically, I've said it. They recycle. Examples include some bacteria. We have fungi. You know, they have saprophytic and they have saprophytic mode of nutrition, or they are also detritivores. They feed on dead organic materials. They help to mineralize the substances that have died on the ground. When they mineralize it, in that way they are able to turn it into organic nutrients that will be available in the ecosystem again, to be returned to the ecosystem again. All right, so if you understand the nitrogen cycle, you understand a little bit of what I'm saying. Now, you should see, just browse on your phone the nitrogen cycle. You are going to see what I'm talking about there. You're going to see a little bit of what I'm talking about there. Now let's talk about I now said there are different types of ecosystem. There are different types of ecosystem. I hope we have talked about everything here. Okay. You know, the abiotic components, you know, we have the light that makes the energy itself available, that is the source of the energy itself, rather. Okay, so we have water, we have the soil, Now, we now have, what are the types of ecosystems that we have? The types of ecosystem. Now, what are the types of ecosystem that exist? Number one is we've talked about the types of ecosystem. We have the types of ecosystem. We have the aquatic and the freshwater. So they are natural ecosystems, okay? We are going to be talking about the natural ecosystem now, the ecosystem that naturally exists, okay? So we have them as aquatic ecosystems. Aquatic, the word aqua means water in Latin here. So aquatic ecosystem refers to the ecosystems of water, and there are about two forms of that one, or maybe even three. We have the fresh water, we have the marine water, and in between we have the estuary. Is that okay? You have the estuary. Now the fresh water is the water that is saltless. It has no salt. Fresh water. It's not like it has no salt at all, okay? But the salt level is very, very less than about 33 parts per thousand, okay? But less than 0.5 parts per 0.5 parts per thousand. Then estuary have their own ppt range to be between 30 ppt, okay, to be about 30 ppt. And then marine are the ones that have greater than 33 parts per thousand, okay? So they are salty, marine water, salty, okay? Then estuary or brackish water, we call them brackish water, okay? Then we have fresh water, which have very low amount of salt. Now, the fresh water is further split into two. The fresh water, we have the lotic and the lentic, okay? So the lotic are the fast-moving water, Example of a fast-moving water is the river, okay? The river. And you know the river has continuity into the sea, right? But the lentic, the slow moving water, they are the example is the stream. Do you understand? The stream, very slow. Do you understand now? Or the lentic means very slow or stagnant, okay? So because we can have lakes which are not even flowing, we can have ponds that are not even flowing at all. So those are all lentic water. But in the lotic water system, we have rivers. So since the stream is actually moving, we can still classify them as lotic. Do you understand now? Stream is moving, only that it's not as fast as the river and it's usually not as big as the river. But we have creeks. Creeks is also a lotic water, but it's moving a little bit. I'm only talking about the lentic, the slow moving water, or the waters that don't move at all. We have the pond, the lakes, etc. So that is the classification of ecosystem according to the aquatic system. So we have A, aquatic, then B, we have the terrestrial ecosystem. These are ecosystem. This one we said aquatic ecosystem are the ones that exist where? In the water. Terrestrial ecosystem are the ones that exist where? On land. Do you understand now? The terrestrial ecosystem exists on land. And these are the types of ecosystems that we have. Now let's talk about what are the functions of ecosystem. There are three functions of ecosystem. They are classified into three. We have the ecosystem primary function. We have the primary function of the ecosystem. The primary function of the ecosystem is energy production. The secondary function of an ecosystem is the flow of the energy, to make the energy flow such that it circulates. So energy, flow of energy or circulation of the energy. That is the secondary function of an ecosystem. So the main function of energy of the ecosystem is what? Energy production. Okay. Then the tertiary function of an ecosystem is interaction. Okay, through various levels of interaction. One population is affecting the other through different processes, such as, for example, the more grasses there are, the more likely we have herbivores. Do you understand? So those are, because you see that interaction now. If there's not much grass, there will be not much herbivores. For example, you don't tend to find herbivores in deserts that much. Why? Because there are no grasses in desert as much as you will see them in grassland. So in savannas, for example, you will see a lot of herbivores. Why? So it is as if it is the population of the grasses that controlled the population of those herbivores. Do you understand? And those interactions, and that's the tertiary function of the ecosystem, or the tertiary function. So that will be it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the nutrition itself, and then we'll first talk about nutrition in plants, before we'll talk about nutrition in animals. But we'll first do a broad overview of it. Do well to subscribe to the channel. God bless you, and share the video with your friends.